All right, why don't we get started? It's 2:03. People might still connect, but let's get going. So it's nice to see everyone. This is workshop number 1 of the OECD EU Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Academy. As you will recall, we all met in Brussels a couple of months ago, and we now have a program of 6 online workshops that we're going to follow over the next few years. This is the first one, and so we're going to focus on access to finance today. And one of the topics that was raised by you, all of you in this group, as one of particular interest was microfinance. So we're going to try to cover quite a lot of material today, and we're going to highlight microfinance. So hopefully you've all seen the agenda and the background note and have had a few minutes to think about how we can work together today and what you want to take away from this workshop. But before we get into the agenda, it's a great pleasure to invite Ruth Passerman to take the floor. Now, you'll remember Ruth from Brussels. She's the Director of Funds, Programming and Implementation at DG Employment, and she's going to get the ball rolling. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you, David. Thank you all. We did indeed have a good launch event in March 2023, and today is the first genuine capacity building event of the Academy, and I'm really very pleased to be here and give it the opening shot. Youth unemployment remains high in several places of the EU, and we must act. Helping the creation of self-employed business activities is part of the solution. Our ambition with this academy is to trigger policy changes in favor of youth, thanks to a better mutual understanding between policymakers, experts, and youth representatives. Today's session is dedicated to access to finance for young entrepreneurs. This is indeed one of the most serious obstacles identified, if not the sole one. According to Eurobarometer we conducted recently, close to 4 in 10 respondents to the survey think that an important reason stopping young people from becoming entrepreneurs is not having enough capital or resources to be self-employed. Most entrepreneurs start their activities with funding from the 3 Fs: founder, the own savings, friends, and families. Now, beside these, other solutions exist and will be discussed. And today, after a general presentation of the tools available, the focus will indeed be on microcredit. This is certainly something to develop. The sector is expanding, and coupled with mentoring, it provides a suitable path for young entrepreneurs. At EU level, we have developed with the sector a code of good conduct for microfinance providers. Those who are evaluated as being compliant are eligible for a specific EU guarantee mechanism, which is funded by the EU. This guarantee allows them to expand their portfolio. As of today, we have about 65 microfinance providers which are certified by us through this code of good conduct. And we also support 2 important networks in this field: the EMN, European Microfinance Network, and the MFC, Microfinance Center. Access to finance is particularly challenging for young social entrepreneurs. Lenders and investors often struggle with assessing the level of risk of youth and social entrepreneurship projects. So within DG Employment, we try to improve the situation. We offer comprehensive financial and non-financial support for social entrepreneurs, and notably young social entrepreneurs, as well as to their financiers, by reducing their transaction costs when providing business development support services. Through the social investment and skills window of InvestEU, we launch products supporting financial intermediaries who are financing or investing in social enterprises. And in this area, our main implementing partner is the European Investment Fund. National authorities can also do a lot and design access to finance aid schemes which are in compliance with state aid rules. In the proposal for a Council recommendation of developing social economy framework conditions, which was adopted last week by the Commission, there is actually a chapter on access to public and private funding. We hope that this recommendation will be discussed and adopted by the member states in the Council. I just stop here. I think it's probably enough for introduction. I trust you will have an interesting debate. And I also see in today's program that you will have practical exercises, the hackathon. So I wish you also inspiration and energy. We will have other occasions to meet and to discuss, as access to finance is only one of the barriers, and others such as the lack of entrepreneurial skills will also be dealt with during our journey within this academy. So without further ado, I give the floor to Celine Kaufmann, Head of Entrepreneurship, SME and Tourism Division of the OECD. So Celine.
Thank you, Ruth. We've had a small change of plans at the last minute. Celine had to go meet some ministers, but we have John Potter, Head of Entrepreneurship Policy and Analysis, to welcome on behalf of the OECD. John.
Hello, yes, welcome on behalf of the OECD. With our partners, the European Commission, we're extremely pleased to be putting this on, and it's great to see you here now and to be able to do this workshop. It's the first one, as Ruth has said, the first workshop of the new EU OECD Youth Entrepreneurship Academy. And as Ruth said, the focus topic today is access to finance. And I think everybody understands why that's a core topic. There was a lot of interest in microfinance in your group. So we're glad that we can put this event on. Bear in mind that there are other workshops coming, 5 workshops in total, so we can cover issues like coaching and training, how to design policy, this sort of thing. And the point is that you have the opportunity to shape the agenda of the workshops. So you will be given ways to let us know what you want to cover, so that we can tailor these agendas to your needs. Just standing back a little, you know, why the YEPA? I know we have done this before, but youth entrepreneurship and why it's so important. Well, we know that youth have got twice the unemployment rates of adults. So something has to be done about that. We know what the cost of that are over a lifetime. This unemployment period. We also know that youth suffer the most as soon as there's a crisis, an economic shock, and we've been having more than our fair share of economic crises and shocks. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID pandemic. It's youth who shoot up in terms of the unemployment and difficulty of accessing the labour market at all. And the entrepreneurship is one of those routes into the labour market, potentially alongside others. It's not the panacea, but it is a route that's got potential, and youth show a lot of interest in entrepreneurship, but they have the barriers that are greater than those of adults in skills, in experience, in networks. And of course, they haven't had the chance to build up their own savings for this family, friends and fools method of financing. So they're more dependent on external, traditional bank sources for small amounts, hence microfinance. So I mean, the idea of having us all here together is to sort of brainstorm out what governments need to do, what sort of precise actions governments can take, given your knowledge of what the issues are. We need to identify the issues for policy, the new directions needed for policy, and then we can translate this into action, you can too. But the international level, the OECD and the European Union are two of your best partners you could imagine for influencing the youth entrepreneurship policy agenda. It's not standalone, all of this. There is a lot of material that's already been produced, and you might not all be aware of it all. If you look up on sort of OECD, EU, inclusive entrepreneurship, that keyword that we've a little bit made our own since 2011 when we started our collaboration, you'll find a lot of things. Most notable are the Missing Entrepreneurs publications that come out every 2 years, and the online Better Entrepreneurship Policy Tool, which includes a self-assessment questionnaire. Last sort of thing is to say it is a good time to look at this topic because it's really risen up the agenda politically. We can see this. We're having our OECD meeting on entrepreneurship and SMEs. I think it's next week in Paris with ministers from 40 countries who are coming. And it's been agreed that on the agenda, we'll have an item on increasing diversity and inclusion in entrepreneurship. And so you've got takers, governments are takers, but we need the concrete ideas. And so back over to you, David.
Great, thank you very much, John. We've got one more brief introductory remark, and that's from Mr. David Takin, who is from MicroStart in Belgium, who is the host, the country host for this workshop. So David's going to be featured throughout the agenda today, but we would give him a quick chance to introduce himself right now. David?
Yes, thank you, and good evening to everyone. So I'm David. I'm the development director at MicroStart, which is a microfinance institution in Belgium. Give access to credit, but also give non-financial support to future entrepreneurs. And why we decided to involve in this project, it's mainly because we see that the number of young entrepreneurs is growing in our portfolio. So we develop different tools to better support them. And I will explain a bit more in details after. But the main message, I think, is that microfinance is not just a financial tool, but it's also a non-financial offer. So most of the time you will get both. I think it's really important when you are working with young entrepreneurs. And a special mention also that on EU level, we are also supported by the EIF through the Invest EU, because we get also the guarantees to get ourselves a credit line at the bank level. So it's quite important to develop EU tools that so we can better support young entrepreneurs. So thank you.
Great, thank you, David. So before we move along in the agenda, let's just take a pause briefly and look at the agenda and have a look at what's coming for the next few hours. So first we're going to go to Helen, who's going to take the temperature of the room, and that will help us get warmed up. Then, if you haven't had a chance to look at the background note that was shared, I will quickly give you an overview and set up the discussion talking about finance and why it's important for youth entrepreneurs. Then we're going to go back to David, who's going to tell us about microfinance, and he's going to use MicroStart as an example to show us how it can be done in practice. Then we've got a second case study, Funds for Good, also from Belgium, who will give us a little bit of a different take on microfinance. And of course, we've got time for questions and answers, so we encourage you to raise any questions you have, whether it's on microfinance or something else related to finance for young entrepreneurs. Then at about 15:15, so in 1 hour, we'll take a little break, and then we're going to go to our group activity, which is where we're going to get into smaller groups and we're going to have a little policy hackathon. So we'll explain that when the time comes. But right now, let's get rolling. And the next item on the agenda is over to Helen. Helen.
Thank you, David. So I have just put in the chat a link that you can use to access the quick interactive quiz. You will also be able to see it appear on the screen with the QR code if you want to scan it. So the idea, as David said, is just to take a quick temperature of the room, see what we're looking forward to learning today, and just get involved right off the bat. So I'll give you a few more seconds to join. It looks like we're up to 14 people. Say it hits around 20, I'll go ahead and start. And if you still join afterwards, it's no problem. You can still answer the questions. Great. Okay, here we go. First question. It loads. The first one is to rank what you're most familiar with in terms of access to finance for young entrepreneurs. So we have microfinance, fintech, procurement, innovation grants, tax incentives or relief, and financial literacy. So we'll see. So microfinance, that's no surprise with how many people today specialize in microfinance. Very interesting. Got some fintech, financial literacy. It's neck and neck with innovation grants. This is great. All right, I'll give 5 more seconds to finish your rankings before we move to the next question. It's still shifting in terms of ranking. All right, it seems to have balanced out. So microfinance, innovation grants, and financial literacy seem to be the top topics that you all are familiar with. So please, as we go throughout the workshop, use your knowledge and expertise, share your insights, especially on the ones that you're most comfortable with. The second question, as it loads, what would you like to know more about? So what areas of access to finance would you like to explore more, or feel like you could benefit from learning from others in today's session? Here we go, startup grants, okay. Mitigate risk aversion among youth in terms of funding their startups. Another one for financial grants for startup programs. Seems to be a theme. Finance. Impact government grants. Tax reliefs, great. There are no wrong answers to this question. This is a peer learning network, so we are here to learn on various different topics we're not aware of. So de-risking, great. Okay, I'll have about 10 more seconds to get our answers in before closing this one down. Quite a few answers. Subsidies, need for non-financial services. That's a great point as well. We'll be addressing that later today. Financing from startup to scale up, that's important, not just to focus on the pre-startup and startup phases. Great, okay. And lastly, if you have anything else you want to discuss or cover today, this is a moment to just say the chat in Zoom is open. So please feel free to continue the conversation in Zoom. Throw your questions in there, throw your comments as we go along. We will be taking note and observing the chat as well. So thank you very much. I'll pass it back to David.
Great, thank you, Helen. It's interesting to see those issues raised. It helps guide me a little bit for the presentation of the discussion note. So I'm going to pull that up. I hope you had a chance to look at it in advance. But if not, I'll give you some of the highlights now. All right. You can see my slides.
Yes.
Good. All right, so here we go, access to finance. So before we get into finance, I thought it would be worth spending a minute just framing around young entrepreneurs, because there were some questions in the kickoff for the groups about, what exactly are we talking about? And, there's not a clear definition of young entrepreneurs or youth entrepreneurs. And in our work, you can see that there are two different perspectives that usually come up. One is a policy perspective, and a lot of the EU policies use the age group 15 to 29. And so not surprisingly, a lot of the countries adopt that as well, particularly when they're implementing some of the structural funds in some of these programs. But there is variation across countries. If you get outside of Europe, you do see things are a little bit different, but even in the EU, in countries where you tend to have high youth unemployment rates, they tend to expand the definition with the rationale being that they can provide support to more people to address this employment crisis, or persistent employment crisis, actually. So, the one example is Spain, which considers all the way up to 40 to be a young person. And then the second perspective is the statistical perspective. And traditionally, Eurostat has used 15 to 24, but they've made a pretty significant change recently. They've got now on the website a youth portal. And in that youth portal, all of the statistics now align with the 15 to 29 definition. So if you're looking for any data on young people, you go to that portal, they've got just about everything. And just a quick footnote, in a lot of the work that was mentioned earlier in the welcome, the Missing Entrepreneurs Report, for example, we use a slightly more narrow definition of 20 to 29. And the reason is that we tend to focus on employment measures, active labor market measures. And so we've made the decision that we do not want to include 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are in principle still participating in formal schooling. But of course, entrepreneurship education is an important topic, and we might pick it up later on in a subsequent workshop. Now, I wanted to just give you a quick overview on youth entrepreneurship in terms of their motivation and their activities. And we've heard some of this already, so I'll just skip through it. But there's a Eurobarometer survey that just was published at the launch in Brussels, you'll remember. It's called Social Entrepreneurship and Youth, Flash Eurobarometer, number 513. There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's a question about, do you prefer to be an employee or would you prefer to be self-employed? And it's quite fascinating to look at it by country because you can see that it ranges from Spain, where 1 out of 5 young people would prefer to be self-employed, and nearly 80% would prefer to be an employee. That's quite a different picture than you get at the right-hand side in Portugal, Lithuania, Cyprus, where the bulk of young people would be preferring to be self-employed rather than an employee. So the point is just to show you that there is a strong interest among young people in being entrepreneurs, and the picture does vary significantly across the different countries, reflecting both culture, but as well as labor market conditions. Now, why do young people want to be working as self-employed or being an entrepreneur? These are the top 3 reasons. They want to be their own boss, so there's a sense of independence. Number 2 was freedom to organize your work the way you want. And third was a personal fulfillment. And the list goes on. There are many other reasons. Having a social impact was in there as well, about 16% overall. And of course, we do see variations across the countries. This is a bit similar, so I'll skip over it. Now, coming to finance, I mean, we heard already about the 3 F's, and we can get a little bit of a picture as to where young people go when they're looking for money to start a business. And these are the sources here. So this is the EU average. Number 1 is their own savings. Number 2, banks. Number 3, family and friends. 4, their own salary. so their own current cash flow. Then it drops down a little bit to public institutions, so public money, crowdfunding, microfinance, incubators, and VC. And so you see that this might not align with your expectations because some of the sources of funding like VC get a lot of attention in the media, but in reality, very few people are able to access these types of funding. So the 3 F's are the top sources: yourself, the founder, family, and friends. This is just the top 3 across the countries. I thought it was interesting to see the variation in the use of own savings. Less than 30% in France, and nearly 60% in Malta. That's quite a difference. Now you can look at it the other way. There are questions in the survey about what types of support would you need if you were going to set up a business. And number 1, young people said finance, grants actually. And then if you look down the list, there's networking, education and training, coaching and mentoring, tax, support with legal requirements, so that's administration, business plans, marketing, then we come back to finance, loans, and microfinance. So the 2 points that are interesting for me here is that 1, finance is number 1, but it's not just finance, it's grants. And grants are essentially free money. And the finance that you have to pay back is much further down the list. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Now, why is it that young people struggle to access financing for their startup? Well, there are challenges on both sides of the finance market. So if we take the demand side first, that would be, the entrepreneur themselves. Well, there are skills gaps. So they don't have the skills to communicate about their business idea. They don't have the skills to identify different sources of financing. They also have smaller networks. So usually an entrepreneur would turn to their network if they need to access something that they cannot. But young people have smaller networks, which is not surprising because they don't have a lot of labor market experience. So when they're looking for finance, they likely have less opportunities among their network to identify other sources of funding. Number 3, we come back to the savings and collateral and even financial history. They don't have a lot of experience, certainly in entrepreneurship in most cases, but also the labor market more broadly. So they don't likely have a lot of savings and collateral that can be used to access debt financing. On the supply side, this is from the perspective of the lender or the investor. It can be difficult to assess the risk associated with a business proposal by a young person, largely because they don't have a long track record. It's hard to see how they've performed in the past because they probably haven't. And that makes the decision of lending and investing much more difficult because you don't have a past behavior to make an expectation about future behavior. Secondly, in small financial transactions, the fixed costs account for a larger share of the transaction. So if you're making an investment or if you're doing a loan, the fact that you're making such a transaction costs money. It costs time to investigate the bank proposal. It costs time to do the paperwork. And so when the amounts of money are small, it becomes relatively expensive to do that transaction. And so that in itself can be a disincentive in many cases because young entrepreneurs are not likely to be seeking excessively large amounts of money. They tend to have small scale ambitions. And so that means that the profit margins, if you're thinking from the bank's perspective, would be slimmer or smaller on these types of transactions. For some groups of young people, they might face a bias. We know from experiments that investors tend to invest in people like themselves. So there can be a gender bias, or there can be a bias depending on where the person's from or what they look like. So that's not necessarily going to impact everybody, but it certainly will impact some groups like young women, for example. And then when you look at the types of businesses that young people are running, We're hearing more about social entrepreneurship as socially oriented businesses. And these types of business models might not be well aligned with the financial instruments that are offered. And so the financial sector has not necessarily caught up with the needs of the entrepreneur. So what can the government do about it? Well, we've put a table in the note to give you a bit of an overview of the main types of actions that governments are taking, with a bit of a description and definition, and then some links to some examples. But you can see there is a whole range, ranging from grants, different loans, some alternative debt financing. You do see occasionally some examples of crowdfunding and some fintech, but it's quite rare. There are some investments in business angel networks, both in terms of providing capital, but also in terms of helping to set up the infrastructure. Self-financing groups might be one you're not so familiar with. It's probably not so applicable to young people, but you see this often in different communities, often migrant communities, well, where you have sort of a group loan. And it's a mechanism where people pool their resources and they get a loan together, and they repay it essentially collectively. So if one person does not repay the loan, then the whole group is not able to access further money. So there's a bit of an incentive for everybody to help each other. And it's just another way of offering debt. And then, of course, at the other end of the spectrum, we've got risk capital. And there are some examples of governments making equity investments in firms. Now, of course, this is only part of the answer, because you might recall a few slides ago, I was showing you the barriers that young people face, and often these barriers are interrelated. So the fact that somebody might have a knowledge gap, well, that impacts their ability to have finance. And so oftentimes public policy does not offer financial support in isolation. It's often matched with non-financial supports. In practice, this typically means training, or it could mean coaching, or a combination of both. And you see this offered in different ways. Sometimes you have finance and non-financial supports packaged together, in that you get finance and you go through a program at the same time. Sometimes they're sequenced. You might have to do a training program to be able to access finance. And of course, the delivery arrangements vary. Sometimes it's the same organization that offers the finance and the non-financial support, and sometimes they're done through partnerships. So we'll see different examples of how it's done today in Belgium. And just one final slide to help set up the case study, the two case studies that we're going to see about microfinance. I think it's important to recognize that the microfinance market is very important for young people. You might recall a few slides ago, I showed you the source of funding. And the most popular sources are the ones where it's difficult to imagine that you can squeeze more out of it. Friends and family and the own resources of the entrepreneur. Once you've maxed that out, it's hard to leverage more. And so then the other sources become much more important, because that's where you can make a difference. And microfinance is an important one because it's targeted exactly at groups that have difficulty accessing sort of your traditional mainstream financial supports, like commercial banks, because the clients are often people that don't have a long track record. They don't have savings and collateral. And so young people are an important client group for microfinance. Now, the microfinance markets vary across the EU greatly in many respects. One is the regulatory environment. There is no EU regulation that covers microfinance across the EU, but there is the Code of Good Conduct, and that is a measure that sets a minimum standard, and the microfinance institutes and other lenders that offer microfinance have to meet that standard in order to access some of the EU instruments. But in addition to that, there are some countries that have microfinance regulations, and there are some that do not. and there are some that are a bit in the middle. And so there are different reasons why you would regulate or why you would not regulate. And in brief, I think the main advantage to regulating is that you help to formalize the activities. You make them legitimate lending activities, which helps to avoid some of the abusive lending that might occur if it's all unregulated. It's not so simple though, because of course there are interactions with banking regulations, because often microfinance lenders are not necessarily covered under the banking regulations, which are often based on holding deposits. Now, in some countries like Austria, for example, microfinance is regulated, but there is a requirement that it's done in partnership with a commercial bank. So it's a little bit of a different type of arrangement. Now, it is true across all of the countries that there is a gap in the market. So the supply of microfinance does not meet the demand, and that gap is growing over time, and it's expected to continue to grow over time. And so this is one area where governments can make a big difference. And how do they do that? Well, there are different ways, but I wanted to let you know that the basics of setting up a microfinance scheme are these 4 points. One is that there needs to be a decision about whether the scheme is going to be targeted, or is it not going to be targeted? So will it be for everybody, or will it be for youth, or will it be for unemployed youth? You can do it in different ways. The second point is, who is going to operate it? Is it going to be a fully public microfinance scheme, or is it going to be offered through and delivered by a non-government organization? There are pros and cons to doing it in different ways. You know, if it's done directly by the government, then you ensure that the scheme is coherent with other policy and program objectives. The disadvantage is that the public sector might not have the expertise needed to deliver financial products and to award the funding. You might want to leave that to the market to decide. So if you partner with actors already in the market, you're leveraging their experience and expertise. Now, the disadvantage of going that route with non-government actors is that there is the risk that you might have very high overhead costs because you have the government managing the program, and the program is implemented by a third-party organization, which also has their own management and overhead costs. The third point is non-financial services. Now, this is traditionally quite important for microfinance institutes. So they often offer small loans. It used to be up to 10,000, but I understand now the ceiling has been raised to 50,000 euros. It's considered a microcredit. And then once it's offered with a training or a coaching, it becomes a package of support. And of course, there are different ways to do this. It could be done directly by the same organization or through partnerships. It could be done with professionals or volunteers and different types of arrangements. And then the fourth point, which is the last one, is the government has different ways in which they can support the sector. They can directly offer capital that would be dispersed in the market. They can reduce the risk for the MFIs who are making the loans by offering guarantees. So that means that they would cover a proportion of the loan if there's a default, 80%, for example. So that reduces the risk for the lender. And in principle, this should offer an incentive for more loans to be dispersed. And of course, there are interest rate subsidies, again, which aims to reduce the risk borne by the lender. So keep all of these points in mind. As we hear about the different examples today, you can think about how they're arranged, and we'll come back and we'll do some activities in the second half of the workshop today, where you get to work through an example and discuss these different issues and debate the pros and cons with your colleagues in the groups. So I'll stop there and I'll pause for questions if there are any. Otherwise, we can keep moving to the MicroStart example. Are there any quick questions? You can raise your hand or put it in the chat. We can also do it later. So I don't see any immediate questions, so I'm going to pass the floor over to David, who will tell us about MicroStart. And you can get a concrete example of what I've just told you. So David, why don't you explain us how MicroStart operates?
Yes, thank you. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. So as I was explaining at the beginning of the session, so MicroStart is a social organization that aims to give access to the financial credit and non-financial services to people who doesn't have access to the credit system. We are a national institution. So in Belgium, to give you a bit of context, there's 4 microfinance institutions, 3 regionals, and 1 national. And regarding the young entrepreneurs, what we see is that so 12% of the total active population have between 18 and 30 years old, but among the entrepreneurs, they represent only 8% of the total amount of entrepreneurs in Belgium, which is pretty low. At MicroStart, young entrepreneurs represent 32% of the total people that we finance. Regarding, because we talked during the last session a lot about incubators and organizations that help students to become an entrepreneur. What we see is that in Belgium, a bit less than 20% of the young person have no high diploma, so it means no university or degrees. But when you look at the data from the entrepreneurs in Belgium, actually it's a bit less than 60% of all the entrepreneurs are who doesn't have any diploma. And at MicroStart, they represent 67%. So 67% of the people that we support don't have any high diploma. So why do we see a lack of financial access in Belgium? It's, well, nothing new, you will tell me, but it's lack of credit history, lack of guarantees, lack of personal contribution, lack of experience, lack of information. So most of the time they don't know how to start a business, but also what kind of financial tool they could use. We see also lack of redirection from the banks, because most of the time when you go to the bank, they say no, and they don't give any alternatives to other like crowdfunding, like microfinance, and so on. We see also, but it's really linked to the Belgian mentality. It's lack of second chance mentality. So we see that maybe young person, they wait to gain experience before starting a business, because if you miss your chance, at the end you won't be any second chance to restart a new business. So this is what we see on the field at MicroStart level. So we exist for 11 years now. We disperse a bit more than 6,000 microcredits for 60 million euros injected in the Belgian economy, which represents also we supported with non-financial services a bit more than 9,000 people with coaching and training. And every 3 years, we monitor our social impact with KPMG, and the social return on investment, it's 12.53. What does it mean? It means that 1 euro invested at MicroStart will go back to the society for 2.53 euros. We monitor this because we are a social organization and we don't make any profit. So actually calculating return on investment doesn't make sense for us. Regarding the young entrepreneurs, now it's represents last year 32% of the project that we finance. And since 2011, it represents a bit more than 1,700 microcredits for 15 million euros injected in young entrepreneurs. And we coach and train a bit more than 2,600 persons. So why do we consider that it's working with young entrepreneurs? It's mainly because we have a tailor-made solution for them. So first, they can train themselves online because we have an e-learning platform. We give also them access to a toolbox with different tips and tricks to start a business. So everything is for free. We have also the management training. So it's a collective training. A lot of young person go to this training because when you don't have a high degree diploma in Belgium, you need to pass an exam to say that you are able to become an entrepreneur. We have also advisors who make the bridge between communities and supports and our support solutions. So what does it mean? It means that those advisors will take more time with people that they don't have, they don't know the language, for instance, or they don't know how to start a business. They don't understand the jargon of the accountants, for instance. So they will take really time with them to explain everything to make sure that they will have access to our services. We have also an adapted and low threshold individual coaching sessions. So we give training info session, but also individual coaching. It's what we call oral methodology. It means that you don't need to have any specific document. You don't need to have a business plan, a financial plan, as we can help them to do it. We do it with them. We'll ask a lot of questions, and based on their answers, we'll build the business plan with them. We have also, like I said, tailored financial solutions. So we start from 500 euros, which could be maybe see as a really low amount that some entrepreneurs can start with 500 euros. And we go for now up to 25,000 euros. It was the EU definition lately, but with the new InvestEU, we can maybe expand those amounts. We are still looking at increasing the maximum amounts. Anyway, for now it's 25,000, and there's also a possibility because we are working with Funds for Good that will present after me, and we can have also an offer which is 2/3 with microcredit, so it means they will pay interest rates, and 1/3 of interest-free loan coming from Funds for Good, which is a good way to get to reduce the cost of the credit, but also to get, let's say, free cash to start the business. We are really working on making sure that microfinance is known in Belgium, and also that entrepreneurship is known in Belgium, because we feel that microfinance is still an underused tool in Belgium. So we have dedicated a campaign. So some are focusing on young entrepreneurs, but others are focusing on migrant entrepreneurs or on women entrepreneurs. Yeah, what can I say? We have also working on other projects. For instance, we are doing partnership with non-financial support organization, which aims to they focus specifically on young entrepreneurs like YEPA or 100,000 entrepreneurs and so on, because we have let's say a complementary offer. So we give access to financial services, and they can support on the long run the entrepreneurs. We are working also on the development of interest-free loan funds that will be dedicated to young entrepreneurs. So like YEPA, it's a Belgian organization that focuses on the needs, but with a focus on entrepreneurship, and they have some money to invest in those projects that they support. And so we will launch a new fund with them. And regarding the redirection from the banks, we will also work with FEBELFIN, which is the National Association of the Banks, and with different banks to trying to make sure that microfinance it's well known by them, and make sure that if they refuse a project, instead of just saying no, they can just refer to any other financial institution like MicroStart or any others. Yeah, this is pretty much it. And one thing also, it's because we talked about see that in the topics that some people wanted to mention, it's the risk aversion of young. On our side, we don't see any risk difference between young person and older one. So the difference is quite marginal. So we don't base the analysis on the age of the person. So it's one thing. Another thing that we see, it's we develop so all the process of MicroStart, it's, well, you can do it on a branch level, so on the field with a physical meeting, but you can also do it digitally, fully digitally. We have a customer portal that we just launched, and what we see is that the young entrepreneurs use much more the digital tools than the physical ones. So it's also one thing that I would like to mention. So yeah, this is pretty much it. I think I covered all the topics I wanted to show you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. So that is MicroStart in Glimpse. And just as a reminder, all of the materials will be put.
I think the mic is.
Yeah.
You need to.
There we go. Sorry about that. I'll re-say that. Thanks again, David, for that nice glimpse of MicroStart. So just a reminder to everybody that all of the materials from today will be put onto the website, so you should be able to access everything in the future. And there will be a summary note that wraps up the main messages. We encourage you to ask questions. We're going to have a Q&A session. You can ask live in person, or you can put it into the chat. I see we've already got a few. But we're going to go on directly to the next presentation, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. So it's a pleasure to introduce from Funds for Good. We have two guests. We have Patrick Sommerhausen and Madeleine David, who will tell us all about what they're doing in Funds for Good. So thanks for joining us. I pass it over to you.
Many thanks, David. I guess we're going to share our screen also. We have some slides, and while Madeleine is handling this, I will already start the show, the presentation. And so I'll take some minutes to explain you who we are and how active we are to help young entrepreneurs. And we partner with entities like MicroStart, which is a very, very important partner and historic partner for Funds for Good. So, personally, I'm the co-founder of this company. I had the chance to launch this company together with my associate 10 years ago, Nicolas Crochet. And together we were volunteering in some NGOs, helping migrants and mostly young people to do kind of school coaching, and we did like one day a week, and those were the best hours of the week. And we decided to spend our time awake, which means the time that we are working most of the time, at the service of less favored people, and young people was certainly an important target for us. And so we were passionate about entrepreneurship and really admiring people creating something from nothing. Would it be an artist or an entrepreneur or someone deciding to do like a travel around the world, or create an NGO, or all those type of projects. And so microfinance was an important step to enter entrepreneurship. And when we started the company, we went to the company of David, to MicroStart in Belgium, to talk with them and see how we could help them. How can we be partners of MicroStart? And so they told us at this moment are the less favored people, so their public were missing some means and equity. They could have a microcredit, but they had a very few or no equity. They had no rich family, fools and friends. And of course, starting with 100% of microcredit, it's like starting a company with 100% of credit. It's not healthy as a financing. And so, as David said, we decided to build a healthier financing with a third of almost equity, and that were those loan of honor, or we call them, so with 0 interest rates loans also subordinated and with a grace period of about 2 or 3 years, which is the time that an entrepreneur needs to fund back the microcredits. So it really plays the role of equity. And after that period, they should refund our own NGO project, Funds for Good Impact, monthly, so that an entrepreneur can enjoy from this money. And so the euro we will use would have several lives. And so we decided to launch this Funds for Good Impact. So this project giving loans of honor and free coaching. So every support we could do to those entrepreneurs. But the problem was to get funding for this. And so we decided as good entrepreneurs to start a business for profit that would donate his profits and a part of his revenues to the non-for-profit. The non-for-profit is really what we want to achieve, but we build a business to make this possible. So we're active in traditional finance. I will not go too long explaining this, but we have investment funds. People are investing in the funds. They get the return of the funds, but we get the management fee, so the fee of management of the funds. Those are our revenues, and if we manage our company properly, we can make profit even. And that's what happened like 2 or 3 years ago. 50% of our profits were above the 10% of the revenue, so we donated about 20% of the revenues the last years. And as entrepreneurs, it's pretty fulfilling, I would say. We are really happy to do this, and we take our energy from the contact we have with all the entrepreneurs. We have the chance to finance, co-finance with the microfinance institution like MicroStart. So basically, that's a strange model. It's interesting because we are not depending from donation from anyone. We donate our own money to our own cause. Now, what were the target groups we were focusing on? So the first one, as I said, we wanted to help the less favored people with more difficulties. And here we have Rami. Rami is Syrian, so he came to Belgium some years ago. He studied lawyer and he could take his diploma and put it in the trash because there's no value here. But Rami is a courageous guy, like all the people we have the chance to finance and to coach. And he decided to launch his catering business. He was so cool even that he decided that within his catering business, he would also give the opportunity to other migrants to work for him. So he gave jobs already to other migrants. So very generous guy. And so for this target group, we call them the self-made. Of course, they don't define themselves as less favored, even if they're probably from the bottom of the pyramid. They are just, and we consider them as entrepreneurs, passionate, hardworking. They're just incredible people. We are so lucky to meet them. And so we provide them loans of honor up to 5,000K together, typically with a MicroStart that would provide 10K of microcredits. On the other side of the slide, you have what we call the game changers. And here you see Jeremy. Jeremy has also launched a catering. It was not the aim to put only catering project, but we've had all the type of jobs of the world. Would be a hairdresser. Right, we have everything. But so Jeremy is doing a sustainable catering system in the way that he's only using local products, organic products, and the delivery is made by bikes, and there is zero waste and everything. So very engaged entrepreneurs, I would say. And for those one, we go up to 25K of loan of honor. So why is that a bit higher? Because those projects have sometimes a bit more of ambition. They start not only with one person, but with different persons. And I would say that we have in-betweens. In-betweens, why that? Because lots of the people we help with MicroStart have also, and more young people, you see those are all young people, are willing to change the world also. They are all lacking means because they don't want to go and work in a large company where maybe they don't find themselves in the values of those companies. And so entrepreneurship is more and more a way for young people to act in line with their values and to be active, to try to make the world better. And we have here Corentin, who is growing trees and also organic trees. And so it's interesting that the scope is broad and we have people from the right and from the left, or people doing from both left and right. So basically we see more and more young people willing to give means, and that is positive. And I will just say a quick word about how can we consider those young entrepreneurs. Is it more risky? And in a way we could say that if you try to launch a company, but also that you you put in the center a sustainable concept that you're most of the time coming with something new, which can be considered more difficult, more complexity. You have more constraints in the way you're producing your goods or your services. So it could be considered as more risky. But on the other side, you receive a lot of love support, I would say. Your supplier and making efforts to help you. Your clients are more faithful, probably. And most of everything, those entrepreneurs are super motivated and committed. And so in a way, it reduces also the risk. But that is what we think. But if you look at a bank, and I was a bit surprised by the figures that David has shown, they do not understand that. And if you start a business today, I mean, at least in Belgium, France, or the country that I know, no bank is lending you money. So I was surprised about the 35% of entrepreneurs saying that they could get funding from banks. But we will dig on those figures later, maybe. So basically, that's what we do. And so we provide two things. So this loan of honor, which is really important to start. So the money is key to start. There is no start of a business without any money. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a success. And so the free support, coaching, mentoring, opening of the network. I've seen this also on the slides of David, which is really important. That's what we do every day. So all these entrepreneurs, we open them our network. We try everything we could, if they accept our help, to boost their business and to try to make them grow. And again, this is what gives us energy. Also, something very important when we are active in this sector, microfinance and social entrepreneurship, partnership is key. And so we try always to partner. Would it be with MicroStart, Credal, small ethical banks, ADI in France, which is the counterpart of MicroStart, Microlux in Luxembourg, and some other microfinance institution in Spain. This is really important because we need that players like MicroStart, ADI, and the others grow. We need to support them. Also, the government needs to help to develop the ecosystem. Instead of launching a new microfinance structure, we would be public because you would be in competition with a microchild, which is really not the aim. You should support this ecosystem to grow, to help more people. If MicroStart would disappear, that would be a very bad idea for Belgium, and the same for ADI and Microlux. So basically, a lot of collaboration is possible. Also, there are different ways when you're looking at impact investors or social investors. Some of them have business models that are not so, the return is low, but the impact is huge. And you should help those ones to grow. And so we need, therefore, maybe some blended finance, meaning that we should reduce the cost of financing for those projects. Otherwise, we'll not be able to finance them. So, I mean, collaboration, partnership is really key. And I think that we have an opportunity by developing some creative techniques of blended finance for that. So mixing like philanthropic money with private money, like a MicroStart, with public money all together to make more project possible. That's what we did. So very shortly, we are proud. We helped more than 1,000 projects. There were the figures, I think, some months ago. So 1,000 projects, but 1,000 people, incredible people, as I said. So we're proud of them. And what's interesting in our model is that it's like a snowball, because we're giving all the 3 months, every 3 months, giving money to our non-for-profit, and the refunding comes back, and so it's growing and growing. And we are pretty confident to double, triple, multiple this by 3, 4, 5, 10 to help more of those courageous people. We make the difference in between the self-made and the game changers. So the pure self-made are about really the biggest majority of project. Of course, the cost of financing is lower. So we have that goes to the game changer, but we're going to grow on both sides. And we still want to continue to help the self-made, of course. We also think that microfinance institution can play a role for the transition. That is what David also was explaining, is that if we want to address the environmental issues and the challenge we're facing today, we cannot forget the social part. So we need to help also the people from the bottom of the pyramid to really enjoy from the growth of our economy, and also they can play a nice role. Very small project with small impact, but also the impact on the come with diversity of project. And so to finish, to conclude, and to give the word on Madeleine, we were pretty involved in our ecosystem, as I said, and MicroStart is certainly one of the most important partners for us. So I have the chance to be in the board of directors of MicroStart and seeing how it evolves. And by doing this and also being active in impact funds, we saw that our ecosystem was also lacking of financial means. And so the only solution for us, because we are active in classical finance, as I said, so we have 600 million under management in listed assets funds, but we cannot use this money to help our ecosystem. So we decided to launch a fund which is purely dedicated to the support of microfinance social entrepreneurship. And so the aim of this fund is to make the European financial ecosystem more inclusive by helping the players there. And Madeleine joined us to be active fully in this fund, which is a new fantastic adventure for us, and I will later explain that. After, if we still have some time, I have a small wish list for the deciders, if there are some in the room, and I would be happy to share that with you after, if you have some time.
Yes, indeed. So as Patrick said, being part of the ecosystem really helped us understand that there was an important funding gap in terms of microfinance institutions and social entrepreneurs. And this was also objectivized by key studies and by the European Commission and the EMN. Here quickly showing the gap that there is in terms of funding or the unmet demand regarding microfinance. So here what you have are two studies illustrating how much need for financing there is in the market for self-employed micro enterprises, individual enterprises, and this has been significantly worsened, let's say, with the COVID, because of course the businesses that were the most hit by the crisis were these small businesses, specifically in HoReCa. And so that was really the starting point of the fund that was launched, ImpactEU, to meet the needs of the market, to help shape let's say a more inclusive Europe, both financially and socially. And as Patrick said, really putting the accent on the combination of social and environmental challenges that need to be tackled together. So what does, more concretely, what does ImpactEU support? We support two types of targets. On the one hand, financial intermediaries, and mainly microfinance institutions that are supporting young entrepreneurs, young people wanting to start their own business or their own employment everywhere in Europe, as well as social enterprises. So directly companies that by definition look to tackle a social and or environmental issue. And more specifically, we focus on 5 key topics, which really believe are at the heart of reshaping a more inclusive European ecosystem. It's social and professional integration, access to sustainable food, access to sustainable mobility, access to sustainable housing, and then local business and relocation. So here what we really want to do is to help enterprises with a specific mission to grow and to develop their impact. Because of course, starting a business, looking for finances is key, but it's key during the entire journey of an entrepreneur. So here what we really aim to do is to support entrepreneurs from start to growth by providing really impact-oriented funding, and specifically non-dilutive funding, so debt instruments, which were, as we showed, really at the heart of the funding gap that we saw. And so we really look to support in the long term by proposing financing, but also support, non-financial support, to help companies grow and grow their impact. Typically what we see is that more and more there are companies developing in terms of tech, related to tech, but business models that are sustainable, that are less disruptive, let's say, but more disruptive in the way that they see the business, are key and essential to creating long-lasting jobs, and to tackle social and environmental issues. So this is typically the types of companies that we look for, and what Patrick also already mentioned is the importance of creating partnerships. And here, one of the key elements that we try to understand a bit better, and it's also what we saw from the numbers, the partnerships that can be created between public and private actors to be able to propose and to offer more long-term funding centered on impact, and being able to help the beneficiaries that need it the most, basically. So voilà, this is a bit what we do with Impact EU.
And maybe if you can conclude by saying what we could expect, maybe to help from the governments or the public actors, is that we are trying to attract money in those funds. This fund, the aim of this fund is to have a size of 100 million. We started with 10 million of private investors, which was not easy to get. Then we have the Belgium public investment company who's going to invest 10 million extra, probably the European investment funds for a lower amount. But we see and we experiment that it's not easy to attract money for impact funds, especially for social. As Madeleine was talking about tech, if you come with a tech fund on environment technology, then you will raise a lot of money. For social is sometimes a poor parent of the impact, and it's really important. And so what we could maybe, and I will come with my wish list very quickly, what we could expect from public actors would be, first of all, to have a common definition of what is a social or a green business. This depends from country to country. If you look at France, they've done a big job to define what is social economy. In Belgium, there is almost nothing, and in some countries, they have different levels of maturity. But I think that really a European definition would be really helpful, and translation that would be the same in different countries would be certainly a positive point. So first of all, definition, and then channel the investment from traditional investment, including the socially responsible investment of listed equities, which as I consider as traditional investment, and more channeling through impact. And impact comes with non-listed assets like Impact EU, but there are a lot of different players, of course, that we need to support. And how could we more channel the money? By having made probably tax shelter or fiscal stimulation, that's first thing, but also giving access to retail to those type of investment, which is not the case at the moment. Again, in France, they have developed a system of what they call the fund 90-10. So 10% of a fund would be invested in impact and 90% in listed assets. And this is used for the second pillar. So really the savings that you can do. And so typically this is something that we could develop, and that will channel a lot of money through impact, and then probably encourage, almost maybe force this institutional investor like insurance company to have at least an offer of impact investing for their clients, and eventually giving like range that they could invest on a minimum in impact, and adapt probably the solvency rule, which are the rules about the insurance company of solvability. So, and the last but not least, if we could increase the liquidity of those types of products, because we are starting Impact EU, and if you invest in Impact EU, it's for 12 years, and you cannot get the money back before 12 years. So of course, it's a weak point of the product. It's impact first, but it's not liquid. So I would say if we can tackle those three issues, we can go very, very far, and maybe philosophically also try to think about a way to valorize the externalities, to give a value to the externalities of a business or an investment, of everything. If you have positive externalities like creating jobs, reducing carbon emission, capturing carbon, helping biodiversity, this has today no value. Again, on the opposite, when you destroy the nature, when you use the resources, it has no cost. So I think that if we can manage to put some value behind that, we could change the whole system, and we would use certainly less natural resources. We do more recycling and everything, and have an economy which is more focusing on human and nature. That's it.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was a great presentation. I like how you emphasized the green, because obviously it's a priority for governments. It's a priority for our society. And at least for myself, when I think about green entrepreneurship and how you finance green entrepreneurship, I often just think about the leading innovations in clean tech. But we have to remember that we need all startups to be more green. So it's important to consider the sustainability of all projects. And so I like the examples that you had on your slide helps to illustrate that. Now we have time for some questions. We've got questions in the chat already. We've got questions in the Q&A. I would encourage young entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurship networks to join the discussion, to make some observations, reactions. We want to hear what you think. I will use my privileged position as the master of ceremonies to jump in first and to ask a question. It's to both David and as well Madeleine and Patrick, and it's about, concretely, how do you decide which projects you're going to invest in? Do you have a checklist? And what is on that checklist? And how do you arrive at the decision? Does it involve a criteria on paper, or do you meet the people to interview them? How do you decide?
I know who starts. I can give an answer about our non-for-profits, so Funds for Good Impact, and Madeleine will probably give a word about Impact EU. So from our side, we received the files from our partners like MicroStart. We have a kind of, I said a kind because it's an eligibility committee looking at the files. If those are small amounts, we do not meet the entrepreneurs, but we have a checklist. They have to be eligible, because if they are in the self-made, we focus on the less favored, and the less favored the people without a job, so workless people. And it seems to be very easy, black or white, but it's not. Like if you have someone doing interim jobs, for instance, they're in precarious job situation, and so we can finance them. So this is the eligibility. Then we look, of course, whether the project is okay in terms of financials, in terms of business model and everything. Most of the time it's okay, but sometimes we can give yes, but, or okay, if you change this or this. So it's never going to be yes or no directly. And for the second target, the change makers, so the impact entrepreneurs, we really try to see whether the motivation of the entrepreneurs is really the impact. So it's very subjective, but we have also a checklist. We have a checklist, and we ask some precise question, and we see, for instance, if the entrepreneurs has put it his model of sustainability in his the official document of his company, or does he have a charter or everything. If they don't, okay, but we ask them to do this before investing in their company. So that's the way we do for our non-for-profit. So for the help between 5,000 euro and 25,000 euro.
And for Impact EU, it's similar in the way of seeing a company, but typically there are two aspects: the impact, and then the more the financial or business. In terms of impact, we have a dedicated committee, which we call the ethics committee, which will let's say give an opinion on the project regarding impact, in terms of what is the impact that the company or the project will bring to society, and is it aligned with what the fund aims to support? And also internally, how is the company organized? Is it one of the is it how we see a company should work to be sustainable in the future? And then in the financials, it's looking more at so Impact EU, it's for companies that have already started and which are looking for financing a bit further down their growth. But typically we look at the key financials of the company. We do a full analysis, and we meet
and we meet all the companies, but those the tickets are from 300K to 1.5 million. So it's size for more mature companies trying to grow and scale up. So of course, there we need more to go in deeply in the due diligence. But for the game changers, we try all the time to meet them because we want to feel their motivation for impact. So it's from
Great. Yeah, David, do you want to add anything?
Yes, when we analyze, let's say we focus the analysis on 3 main points. The first is the person. What is the financial situation? What is the personal situation? What is the experience, and so on. So the main point it's really the person, because we prefer to finance a good person with a bad project than a good project with a bad person. Then we look at project itself. Is it self-sustained after a short period or long period? What are the clients? What is the sector, and so on? And then we looked at the guarantees, which means for us it's mainly external guarantor, because it's the way microfinance is working most of the time. So yeah, this is pretty much it. So we really focus on the person. So it's really the main point.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to try to pick up some of the questions in the chat, and a warning to Julian, some of them are directed to the European Commission. So I might turn to you for a brief response. There was a question about regulations, and regulations are, of course, very important because that sets the rules for the marketplace. And those were not covered in the background note intentionally, partly because we're focused on people that design and implement entrepreneurship policy. And those would not be the same people setting banking regulations. But of course, they can try to exert pressure onto their colleagues in the government to try to change things. But it's really a different animal altogether. So it's the responsibility of the people who are operating these types of programs to learn about the regulatory environment in their country. And of course, the regulations are important because they're there to help mitigate risk to the financial system, to mitigate risk for lenders and investors, and also to mitigate risk for the people who are receiving the funds. We have to remember that, we don't necessarily want to give the message that we should invest in all young entrepreneurs. That's probably not a good idea. Not all projects are going to succeed. And we don't want to saddle young people with debt that will then have negative consequences for other aspects of their life. In our work at the OECD, we're fortunate that we get to travel around and work in different countries. And I remember being in several countries in the EU who would tell me that the really high potential young entrepreneurs would leave and they would go to London to start their business in the UK because in the UK, it's very easy to exit a business and you don't really have any consequences. If the person had stayed in their EU country, they might have lingering consequences on their personal finances, and that might prevent them from getting a loan to buy a house in the future. And so it's quite important. It's a big issue. And of course, we acknowledge that all countries are removing barriers in the regulatory system and trying to ease all of these issues, but they still exist in some countries. There are some other sub-questions in the question about regulation, about effectiveness and impact. Just very briefly, the forthcoming Missing Entrepreneurs report will have a whole chapter on this. But in short, it seems clear that financial supports do have an impact in the short term. They do improve the business performance in the short term. There is a curious finding that seems to be that when you have bundles of different supports, including finance, the results are a bit mixed. And so we have to unpack that still, but is an interesting finding nonetheless. I don't want to spend too long about this. Let's pick up some other questions. Julian, there's a lot of questions about funds for young people pre-seed financing, equity, social entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Maybe you could give us a quick overview as to the different mechanisms.
Yeah, I can give a quick overview. So at EC level, at European Commission level, we rarely directly intervene in businesses. The sole way we do that is regularly we publish call for proposals. For instance, we published recently a call for proposal in order to help the connection between social enterprise and mainstream business, and then we cover part of the cost of the projects. So you Google call for proposal EU, you will see the list of open call for proposals for the moment. So that's a way we directly intervene, we directly give grants, but most of the time we indirectly help entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, in particular in my unit. There are plenty of other instruments in another DG, another ministry, which is called DG Grow, but in DG Employment for social enterprise, we mainly, first with microcredit, as it was already said, when we have assessed that a microfinance provider was in compliance with the European Code of Good Conduct, this organization can have a guarantee from the EIF in order to expand its portfolio of lenders and takes more risk, basically. I guess MicroStart has this award. I'm quite sure of it. Yes.
Yes,
also, now we have the Invest EU fund, where we have a couple of billions for social activities. What do we do with this amount of money? We basically support financial intermediaries with the same logic, so they can also support better social enterprise on the ground. So we help them to expand their portfolio, to take more risk, or to invest in markets where they are not always familiar with. And also a third possibility is the implementation of the European Social Fund, now called EUSF Plus, where each country has an implementation plan of the money it received from this fund. And now social economy is a priority in many countries. So you have to look for the authority in your country responsible for implementation of European Social Fund, and then you will see their program, and you might be eligible for money. So this is just part of the picture. You have, unfortunately, plenty of fund at EU level. I would say that the EU money possibilities are numerous, but it's quite complex to access it. So one way to do it is to contact a network, which has already some knowledge on how to access EU funds, or contact the network Entreprise Europe, which is a quite known and well spread network set up by the Commission itself in order to help entrepreneurs to access EU funds. I will put this last contact in the chat of Entreprise Europe network.
All right, thanks, Julien, and we'll pick that up in the note as well. Once we adjust the note, we'll add to it from the content based on the discussion. Andreas has his hand up, so we'll pass him the microphone now.
Thank you, David. Congratulations for the excellent presentation, all the speakers and panelists. My name is Andreas Stefanidis. I'm coming from Greece, representing the Federation of Young Entrepreneurs. And I would like to address the following issue. I think it's very important to support at European level the pre-seed financing of new innovative ideas, because it's impossible to find pre-seed financing. The majority of business angel or venture capital funds, they want already the businesses to have, let's say, proof of revenues and profits. So this is not the case when something is very innovative at a very preliminary stage. And also at the same time, to take into consideration the different ecosystem, national ecosystem of the European members. I sent you the link of the Global Complexity Index for 2023, just to give you an example. Greece is the second most complex country globally on the business environment. So imagine how difficult it is for young entrepreneurs of Greece to find an investor between all the other obstacles that they have about, training, education, etc. So even the business complexity, they say, why not to start the business in Cyprus or in UK, as you just mentioned, and so on. So pre-seed financing from a mechanism central from Europe, that the assessment will be made from business developers experience all around Europe, crowdsourced evaluation, I think is something that will support very much the new business ideas of young entrepreneurs all around Europe. It is something that is missing, not just microcredit. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And that is echoing a bit the remarks that Vicky added in the chat, where she said that there is a gap between education programs and accelerators. So I think she means that when young people are finishing their school, getting into accelerators, even though they complete an accelerator program, they cannot attract early stage investment. I'm just having a look to see if I missed any questions in the chat. Don't see any. Would anyone like to make one intervention before the break?
That's what I mean. On this point, that's what we experiment also in Belgium, in what we do, and in the other countries where we are a bit active, is that really the funding gap is absolutely at the early stage. And so there, what we again experiment in Belgium are more crowdfunding platforms can help at this stage. A bit of public money. Microfinance is a solution, and a solution like ours. So indeed, the funding gap is there, and the key moment is there, especially for the projects that are not tech, that have not such a huge ambition of growing and of growing impact. And probably we need a lot of very small organic shops. We need a lot of small initiatives. This is the economy actually, and not only focusing on the big projects, because they manage to get the money. So indeed, I think there is something to do to help the ecosystem helping at the early stage. And the complexity, of course, is a nightmare. We are in a society today where we do not trust anymore the people. Microfinance is again it's about trust, because those people go to the banks, and sorry, nothing against the banks, because they are probably not good equipped to answer those demands. But what is happening is that the door is closed. And so they go to the microfinance institution, and then we listen to them and we trust them. And when you talk to the clients of MicroStart and the other microfinance institution, what they say is that, oh, I've paid this this rate on my loan. No, they just said we came somewhere and somebody trusted us. And so it's about trust.
Nice point. We're coming. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, just to come back on what Patrick was saying, it's I completely follow is what he was saying, but on top of this, I think it's we don't have to look at different solutions alone and see it as a complete solution, because microfinance can work with crowdfunding platform, can work with banking system, with co-financing and so on. So that's, at the end, it's thinking about the ecosystem like a way to diversify the risk maybe, and also to collaborate more. And I think one of the political push that we could have is to, let's say, to say to the banking system, hey guys, there's plenty of different solutions that can help you to finance your clients and at the end become a banking client. So I think there's something to do regarding the ecosystem and the collaboration between different institutions.
No, I think that's a great point, David. Cooperation and collaboration is especially true for governments, of course, because they need to work together with all of the actors, not only to deliver the support, but also to understand the context and what is needed and where public policy can have a helping role, and even potentially where it can be damaging, because we don't want to crowd out actors that are doing a good job in the marketplace. That would be a bad outcome. If there aren't any other interventions or questions, there is one quick point I wanted to pick up on, which goes back to the beginning when people were identifying what they wanted to learn about. In the discussion today, I was a little bit struck by how many people said grants. And I don't know what the other speakers think about grants, but I view grants as a slightly risky public policy tool, mainly for two reasons. One is that it's an expenditure and there's absolutely no way you can recuperate that. And when you're investing in businesses, that's a risky thing to be doing. Now, I think there are some cases where you can justify it, where you have extremely disadvantaged populations who might, have extreme difficulty even accessing microfinance. You might be able to justify a small grant to help them get started with the hopes of getting them into a different type of support mechanism later on. But the second point, and perhaps even more importantly, is the way that it impacts an individual's incentives. If a person is given a bag of money and told, okay, go do your business, the behavior is typically quite different than if they're given money and said, you have to pay me back in 5 years. They invest usually much more in the activity to work that it succeeds. So there is that question of grants, and the position that we usually take is that it's often preferable to have repayable mechanisms rather than grants. Andreas, I think, has raised his hand again.
David, just a small comment on what you mentioned.
Yeah.
We have already estimated the grants mechanism. It should not be 100% for free. It will the businesses will give 2 or 3% maximum to the grant mechanism, not because the grant mechanism will take any profit, but in case of an exit, there will be a revolving source of income for the same grant. This is number one. We have already did that 6 years ago, but at national level we were not successful. And second important is, if you estimate the non-formal training experience of giving even free grants to very good and valued, crowdsourced, valued, innovative ideas all around Europe, the European ecosystem will become much greater, and that will benefit the whole European economy. I don't have the mechanism to measure that, but I'm sure that even from putting them, because the educational system, they do not put them to become entrepreneurial. Imagine that we just came from Bologna to create an entrepreneurial mindset program for public employees of Europe. So I know what I'm talking about. Now, if those grants goes to the appropriate innovative pre-seed financing ideas, it will benefit all Europe automatically. Thank you very much.
A big question. We can have a discussion and perhaps an even collaboration later on to try to compute some of these numbers. All right, well, let's bring to a close the first part of the workshop. I hope you enjoyed the presentations and took away some points. I'm going to pass the floor over to Helen